It's time for Recipe of the Day. Raise your hand if you love garlic, cream, and chicken. This recipe is for you. It is a creamy garlic chicken recipe that really uses things that I tend to have on hand or substitutions that I can easily do instead. It comes together really quickly. Juicy chicken, creamy garlic sauce, really easy to make. But because it's, luscious, creamy, garlicky chicken, you can do this for a weeknight like tonight, or it can be a nice dinner on the weekend too. Wonderful served on egg noodles or over rice too. Really great. So you're going to start with 4 boneless, skinless chicken breasts that are 7 to 8 ounces each. If they are bigger ones, you can slice them in half into cutlets. But even if you're using these sort of smaller sized ones, you are going to pound them thin to 1/2 inch thickness. I find that with chicken breasts, if they're in contact with the heat for less time, they end up less dry. So by pounding them thin, they're of even thickness, they cook through evenly, and they're not in the heat for as long, so they end up nice and juicy. Then you're going to sprinkle them all over with a teaspoon of garlic powder. And don't worry, there is actually garlic cloves in this recipe too, but the chicken is getting a nice garlic powder seasoning on it. And then 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt and 3/4 of a teaspoon of pepper. You're eyeballing this, just your approximate amounts of garlic powder, salt, and pepper all over both sides of the chicken. And then you put a 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour into a pie plate or on a plate, and you dip the chicken in on both sides, just giving it that little coating, which just helps it brown a little bit, and a little bit of that flour will get into the sauce, helping it to thicken a bit. After you dip each piece of chicken in the flour on both sides, just shake it off. You don't really need the excess sticking to it. Next, you're getting out a large skillet that your 4 chicken breast pieces can fit in a single layer without overlapping and with a little space around them. And to that, you're adding 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil and 1 to 2 tablespoons of butter. It is, of course, best if you use 2 of both. It will be extra rich and tasty, but if you want to use 1 of each, that is fine. Heat that over medium-high heat just until really hot. And then you're adding the chicken in a single layer and cooking it until it's nice and brown on both sides and cooked through. If you're using a thermometer, it's kind of hard to use a thermometer when the chicken is that thin. But if you're trying to, it's 165 degrees Fahrenheit that you're looking for, or just cut into one you want it to no longer be pink inside. Then once it's browned and cooked through, you transfer the chicken to a plate. And then to that skillet, you add 10 to 12 small cloves of peeled garlic. These are whole cloves. Now, if your garlic cloves are bigger, that's fine. Peel them and then cut them into half, and you'll just be using 5 to 6 cloves total halve to make your 10 to 12 pieces of garlic. And you're cutting them in half lengthwise. So you get like long bits of garlic. If you do it the other way, they'll be too thick and they're not going to cook through in the time that they're in the heat for this recipe. And so you've added the garlic to the skillet. It's still over medium-high heat, and you're going to cook, stirring those pretty often until it's lightly browned. The cloves are taking on a little bit of color. It's going to be about 2 minutes. Then you're going to add some chicken broth to that. Now, it is either 1 cup of chicken broth that you're adding, or you can do 3/4 of a cup of broth and a 1/4 cup of dry white wine, or you can do the 1 cup of chicken broth and just add a little bit of acidity with 2 teaspoons of lemon juice or 2 teaspoons of white wine vinegar. I will say, as to the wine or the white wine vinegar or the lemon juice, I'm going to give you some substitutions for cream in a moment, and I'm going to be telling you to not use those things if you're using anything other than heavy cream. So keep that in mind at this step. But yes, you're adding that 1 cup of liquid plus possibly 2 teaspoons of acidity. And you're going to just cook and stir, scraping up any browned bits of the skillet until it's reduced to a fairly thin layer in your skillet. That'll take 3 to 4 minutes. Then you're adding in a cup of heavy cream. Now, dairy products can curdle if they're heated high and or if they are in contact with something acidic. But if they are a high fat content, they won't curdle as easily. So that's why this calls for heavy cream. If you wanted to use something else, sour cream, yogurt, half and half, whole milk, coconut milk, oat milk, all of those things do risk curdling. I want you to know that if your sauce curdles, it's perfectly safe to eat. It just looks weird. So if something goes wrong here and you end up with curdling, don't panic. You're fine. But okay, so you can use the 1 cup of heavy cream. If you wanted to use any of the other things that I mentioned, I would say don't do it at this point. I'm going to tell you what to do in a moment. So I'm going to just proceed assuming that you're using the heavy cream, in which case you could have had the lemon juice, the white wine, all of that's going to be fine. You're adding a cup of heavy cream to the skillet, bringing that up to a boil, and then you reduce it to a simmer. Cook, stirring occasionally until slightly thickened, about 2 minutes. Then you're stirring in a 1/4 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. Stir that in, taste the sauce. You can add some more salt and pepper if you'd like. Then return the chicken to the skillet, kind of spoon in some sauce over it, and just let it simmer in there until the chicken is cooked through and the sauce is thickened as much as you'd like, just 2 to 3 minutes. And then that is it. Remove the chicken from the skillet, spoon that sauce over top. Delicious, wonderful. You have those little garlic cloves in there. Really nice. Now, if you were using something other than the heavy cream, what I would actually recommend is that you're going to add your chicken broth as instructed, not wine and not lemon juice or vinegar. So 1 cup chicken broth, do the stirring to bring up any brown bits from the skillet. And then at that point, put your chicken breasts back in there, just heat them through for that moment. And then what you're going to do is take the skillet off the heat and leave it off the heat right there with the chicken in there for 5 minutes. It's just cooling the temperature down a little bit. Then take the chicken breast out of the skillet, and then you're going to add your dairy substitute, whatever you're using. Do half a cup though. You don't want as much because it's going to be too thin of a sauce because you're not going to be able to like boil it, right? And so whether that's whole milk, evaporated milk, oat milk, whatever that is, do half a cup of it, add it in there, bring that just to like a warm over low heat, stirring constantly. And then whisk in that Parmesan cheese, continuing to whisk and stir just to melt it in, and then spoon that over your chicken. Okay, I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date, so it's helpful to know that today is February 18th of 2025. The other place you can get this link is in our Facebook group for this podcast. I post the recipe of the day link there every single day, 7 days a week. You can always find a great idea for something perfect to make for today at the Recipe of the Day podcast or Facebook group. Head to facebook.com/groups/recipeotd. I'm Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all new chicken cookbook, or from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.